Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of AutoCentral, South Africa's #1 motoring podcast. My name is George Mienie, and as usual, joined by Wandile Sishi, and we're in a different studio today.
Yeah, it's like we're playing musical studios, yeah.
Yes.
Each week it's a new one.
Yes,
but,
so we're having some work done on our main studio, so we've gone to the secondary studio.
Yeah.
Still
But
in
we're
the
familiar
office.
with it, so it feels like home.
Yeah, it does, because we started out here, I think, and it was our first couple of episodes were done right here, as a matter of fact. Yeah. So anyway, today's episode, getting right into it. Oh wait, before we go to today's episode, well done, Mr.
Thank
Hamilton.
you. I'm speaking on behalf of LH44. What a race! It wasn't just him. I think the entire field delivered on.
I'm really gutted that Norris. Lost. I mean, he really deserved to win that race. But he made a, like, and it just shows you in F1, like one little decision. Yeah, the team said to him, they asked him what do you think's going on the track.
Lando, what do you think about it, Inter? What do you think about it in Inter?
No! And he made the call to stay out. No, let's ride it out. Yeah. And
we saw Brad Binder do the same thing, and he came out stronger a few weeks ago. So look,
Schumacher's done it. Michael Schumacher, he did it in the day. He did it a few times where he was like, I'm staying out on slicks. But I think it takes a special driver and a special experience to be able to pull that off. Definitely. And I'm not so sure Norris quite had it.
Look, he's learned the lesson now, and I think he's gonna come out stronger. But let's see what happens in the next race. I think it's gonna be an exciting few races left.
And how's Verstappen coming from last to on the podium?
People that understates how incredible that is.
Unbelievable. But I mean, Hamilton's done it before. Schumacher did it in his day.
That's
true. So the great drivers did it. And how's George Russell?
Yeah, I mean, he's at, it's crazy. I know we're going on a tangent here, but he's had the same amount of points in the last, I think, 6 races as Perez, in arguably one of the worst cars on the grid. So he's another person who's gonna, he's gonna
shake it up next year. I think he's gonna give all Hamilton a bit of a go. But anyway, we're not here to talk about F1. We're here to talk about the Drive to Survive episode. Nothing to do with the TV series on Netflix, that F1 series, which was very good. I watched it. Drive to Survive. You should go and watch it. But we coined this episode Drive to Survive. And how do you drive to make your car survive? Yeah. That was the reason we put this together. And then later on in the show, Sean Nurse will join us to unpack the capable 2021 Mazda BT50, which is a bakkie. South Africa's most loved segment is bakkies. And then lastly, and as usual, we'll be answering some of your Ask AutoTrader questions from our platform. So let's get straight into it, Wandi. What are some of the things that you would recommend people avoid
in order to make the car survive?
Yeah, in order to make the car survive, I mean, we've touched on some of these topics before, where how to save fuel, how to drive efficiently, but some things, when done, I think damage your car.
Yeah, I think today's episode is more about the things that people don't even realize that they're doing. But something that I want to point out is just checking what fuel goes in your car. That's the one thing that puts a lot of fear in my heart. And I know that's something that you don't even have to worry about anymore. So I'm so jealous that you don't have to deal with that. But that's for me. That's definitely something to avoid.
Talk like that. Don't tell anyone.
Where's it gonna go?
Don't tell anyone. But I had to drive a petrol car yesterday.
Okay.
And I got into this petrol car, and first of all, it was like relearning to drive. And I know it's been a short time since the EV, but it was like relearning, because the car coasts. You have to use the brake pedal.
Is it a completely different experience? Because I've actually never personally driven a fully electric car. I've driven a hybrid.
Okay.
And was using hybrid energy at the time. It wasn't in full electric mode.
Oh, we've got to get you into an electric car.
Yeah, you promised. So
yes, I'm saying that on air now. We're gonna get you to drive one at least.
Is there anything that you would, kind of off the top of your head, tell people to avoid doing?
Well, with an EV, I'll get to that last, and
Okay.
people can wait till to the end of the episode. But I had to drive a petrol car yesterday, and it was almost like unlearning what I'd learned to do with my Jaguar I-Pace. bad driving habits, or not driving habits, but bad habits in your car could lower the resale value of your car in the long term.
Definitely.
And, so let's talk about a couple of those things. What are we've put together some of the things that could be happening unknowingly, as you put it. The first thing is dragging the brakes.
So that's something that I actually do. So I remember when I saw this, I was like, no way, is this destroying my vehicle? But I think it's something that people...
Dragging the brakes downhill.
Downhill specifically,
yes.
yeah. I think I did it like a few days ago when I was in Basonia. I was going down a hill and I was, trying to be safe almost.
So you're just touching the brake pedal
the whole time, consistently touching it.
So what is the right thing to do?
So it turns out you're supposed to almost feather your brake pedal and a very low gear, so you don't have to constantly be braking. So the lower your gears are, the more the car kind of assists you in slowing down the vehicle.
Yes.
And that's a nice way to just let the brakes cool down a little bit, so you're not putting so much pressure on them. Because
you mean a high gear, not a low gear?
No, I think it is a low gear. I think
low gear with high revs.
You're supposed to engage a low gear and just kind of coast down the hill.
Okay.
And that saves your
so engine braking. So
exactly that.
Foot off the fuel, you've got engine braking going on, and then you say feather the brakes.
Yeah. Not necessarily, because the car, it does help.
Well, I suppose what's happening when you drag the brakes is you're heating
the brakes.
You're heating the brake pads. You're heating the brake discs.
Exactly.
You're putting extra wear and tear on. I once drove I used to have the Golf, one of the Golf 1s. I didn't have the GTI. I had a 1500 Golf 1 back in the day, and I got to drive a GTI. Which was the old Golf 1 GTI.
Okay.
The problem with that car was the brakes.
What was wrong with the brakes?
If you drove that car for its power, eventually you would run out of brakes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because of the heat, it starts to boil the brake fluid, and eventually it feels like a sponge. You just can't stop the car. And maybe we can ask Sean a bit later about that. But dragging the brakes down.
He races cars, so he'll probably give us some tips.
Yeah, your brake pedal starts to get a bit spongy. So dragging the brakes downhill, that's a problem. Don't do it. Puts heat into the system. Potentially damages your brake discs. Wears your brake pads out sooner. Use the engine to brake. And
I think your drivetrain also will have a huge impact on exactly how much you can be saving ultimately your brake pads. Because I know an EV, completely different story. It's a different way of doing it as well there.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting of these things that you think. Or you start applying, like you're saying, you just drove a petrol car. You start applying
those
things
principles
that you've learned in other cars, and it's like, no, this
doesn't work that way.
It's detrimental. Yeah.
Then resting your hand on the gear lever.
So
how many people do that? You sit and you drive and you rest your hand on the gear lever. Now, I don't know if this goes for an automatic car with a gear lever, because now traditional gear levers are like probably a thing of the past. You've got buttons and dials and stuff. So, but if you've got a traditional manual car, resting your hand on the gear lever apparently is bad for the car.
Look, I don't think it's going to be I don't think it's going to ruin your car.
It might.
But who knows? I think with enough...
You've got a heavy hand.
Yeah, maybe. And it's crazy because I drive an automatic and I actually rest my hand on the gear lever.
I don't know if an automatic is...
I don't think it impacts.
I don't know if it impacts. Maybe again, we can ask Sean when he comes on.
But it's a habit. Once again, it's something that I've taken from... basically just watching TV and driving my friends' cars, and when I started driving, I do that, and now I learned that that's a
bad habit. So what actually happens is as you rest your hand on the gear stick, it puts pressure on what's called the selector fork at the bottom, and that selector fork there is not supposed to be engaged all the time. It's actually only supposed to be engaged some of the time when you're actually changing gears. Other than that, it's just resting there, and it puts pressure. And I mean, I'm pretty sure you can feel if you're when I've driven manual cars in the past, is if you put pressure on the gear stick, you can feel the rotation of the shafts.
No, you can
feel the slight vibration, and that's what's then putting wear into that selector fork. And
I know there's also some gears where if you have to press it down to actually engage the reverse gear.
Yeah. So in an Opel, you pull the selector up.
And
whereas Golfs and VWs you push into the floor to select reverse.
And that could be another problem that you're trying to avoid, is accidentally engaging the wrong
Reverse?
gear
No,
because
you
of it.
can't. I don't think you can.
Well, you'd have to, you'd have to kind of move it around. But I mean, it's
You can't. I'm pretty sure you can't engage reverse when you're going.
Oscar South African. Challenge accepted. We'll see. I'm sure there's somebody who's
I mean, I've got a story on an EV on that, but I'm pretty sure in a petrol engine car you can't do it. But and then flooring the accelerator in a high gear. So what do we mean by high gear? High gear is when the revs are low.
Yeah, so you're in fifth gear.
You're in fifth gear, you're in fourth gear, and the revs are like 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 RPM, and then you floor the car. I think what happens is you cause what's called a bearing knock.
Would this be in a scenario where you, for instance, on the highway and you're moving at a certain speed and you just kind of take off your foot off the accelerator and you're letting the car coast in fifth gear, for instance?
Fifth gear, yes.
And now you want to start accelerating again.
Yeah.
But you don't go down to like a third gear. Or
You don't pick the revs up before you put your foot down.
Exactly.
So the engine's not designed to operate at those low RPMs.
What is the risk?
I think it causes bearing knock.
What's bearing knock? Is that like a?
Well, on the ends of your conrods.
Yeah.
Probably too much detail, but on the ends of your conrods are bearings that are around the crankshaft.
Okay.
And the crankshaft. This is what makes an ICE vehicle so inefficient, is because there's so many
energy.
No, switches in the direction of the motion. So you can imagine the engine, the pistons are going up and down.
Yeah.
Okay. That has to turn the crankshaft to spin.
Yeah.
So now you've got to create this elliptical motion. Okay, so now you've got to turn an up and down motion into a turning motion, and that's where the bearings come in on the crankshaft. That turning motion then has to drive the gearbox in a turning motion, and some engines are mounted transverse or across the engine bay. A lot of engines are because they can't fit in the in
like a vertical sort of
in the straight.
Yeah.
So therefore now you've got to again use a bunch of gears to change the direction. That's what makes the ICE vehicle so inefficient. But at the bottom of the crankshaft you have
these little bearings that you
these bearings, the crank. I think they're called big end bearings. And when the piston is moving very slowly and you put your foot down, it causes the knock on those bearings.
And that's going to damage.
Causes
ultimately.
wear. Yes. Too much information, but yeah.
I mean, I'm sure we'll have we have some great editors, so they'll put some graphics there.
Well, yeah, I don't think you can do it in modern cars, to be honest.
Probably not.
Yeah. And then overloading. What about overloading?
I mean, this makes sense. I've seen it many times. I have family in Mozambique, and I mean, you can just see the strain of the car. You can see the strain of the cars in when you overload.
People go to Tile Africa and they put just one box of tiles. You put 5 boxes of tiles and then you're way overloaded.
You can actually see visibly that the car is under serious strain, and that has so many implications, and not just. Your axle. There's so many things that can go wrong because of doing that, especially if you're doing it, many times.
Yeah. I've seen station wagons where people load too much weight in the back, where the actual car seems like it's bent.
Literally, you can actually see.
I've seen Buckies do that.
Yeah.
Where it seems like the chassis or something is bent. So
kind of straightforward. Avoid overloading.
Well, you'd be surprised that the car actually can't carry that much weight.
It's crazy because cars. You see them doing it, so I think a lot of people get brave seeing Cressidas with the biggest load of stuff that people have put inside. So
shifting from drive into reverse.
I've never done this before.
I found out that I could do it with my Land Rover while I was still moving, and then the entire drive train locked up.
Yeah,
I only did it once or twice, and then got a fright.
Yeah.
And it's the dial.
Luckily, you weren't moving fast at this point, right?
I wasn't moving very fast. Okay. It was literally
just coasting.
Not even coasting. I was going 0.5 kilometers an hour.
Okay.
But as I turned the selector to reverse,
you could feel the whole car.
The whole car just locked up.
Yeah.
And that could seriously strip the gears in your gearbox. I think.
Yeah, 100%.
100%. I don't think you can do it with manual gearboxes nowadays. Revving the engine while cold.
I mean, I think that this has mostly to do with you need the oil to be warm so it can lubricate the rest of your engine. It operates at its optimal level. Yeah.
Engines are designed to operate at temperature. They're not designed to operate cold. So you can imagine your car sitting overnight. It gets cold. All the oil goes to the bottom into the sump, and it's cold. Mm-hmm. Now this thick, when something sludge is at the bottom of your sump.
Yeah.
It's all drained off the pistons or the conrods and the bearings, and now you're late for the school run.
And you try to just make it work like
And
an
you're
F1
late
car.
for work,
Yeah.
and you floor it, and now you get serious wear on your
Basically
engine.
everything, yeah.
Your car's got to be at least, I think. I mean, because I'm a pilot, the engine's got to be at least over 50 degrees Celsius before you can
Start
do your takeoff run,
frequency, yeah.
which I'm assuming a car's engine is very similar. Then another one is riding the clutch.
Yeah, I mean, please, can you explain this one for me? Because I've never experienced it.
Well, it only happens in manual cars, and that is when you change gears, but you leave your foot lightly on the clutch.
Okay.
This was a real thing in the day,
Yeah.
especially if you're on a highway and your car's in fifth. You're cruising along, but your foot's lightly on the clutch. So what's happening is the clutch selector is slightly pulling the clutch into
the next
place.
gear almost, yeah.
Well, not into the next gear. The clutch is it's supposed to disengage when you take your foot off. Now, what you're doing is you're slightly making that friction worse.
Is it going to cause friction? Is it actually going to start like moving? Okay.
Because when you put your foot on the clutch, what happens is the clutch disengages the gears.
Yeah.
And it's not supposed to. Now, you imagine you put your foot lightly on the clutch. It wants to disengage, but it's not sure. Yeah. There's wear going on there.
I wonder what the monetary value of all of these things are.
I'm pretty
of how
sure.
much you could save.
I'm pretty sure you could save quite a bit of wear and tear, but also the value of your car. It's an underlying. You take your car to get a roadworthy certificate, and then suddenly, this is wrong, that's wrong, and you have to fix it before you sell it.
So before I've been waiting. Earlier on, you said that you're going to give us some details with what not to do with an EV.
Yeah, so let's very quickly, before we get Sean on, so the things I've learned with an EV is using the brakes rather than regenerative braking. Now, all that's going to happen is you
should or you shouldn't?
Use the regenerative braking. You should relearn to drive without using the brake pedal. I've got this own personal challenge going on where I try not to use the brake pedal.
You just let its regenerative braking kind of
break the car.
Yeah.
So it's much more difficult to do in an ICE vehicle, but now I can bring the car almost to a dead stop, except if you're going downhill because the car's gonna roll
or moving really fast. Yeah.
So try not to use the brake pedal. And you know what I find? Less brake dust on the mags.
Does that, in terms of
regenerating
energy, as it
recharges the
battery?
batteries, yes.
Does it actually?
Yes. So it's good for recharging the battery, as well as it saves you money on brake pads and brake discs. And then flooring the car all the time. Because of the high power of an EV, you're going to go through tires like you can't believe.
Is it spinning the tires, or is it just like...
No, even when you don't. I mean, the traction control doesn't allow you to.
Okay.
But you can imagine the force on the tires is going to cause the tires to wear. And then what I did find in my EV is that I can switch from drive to reverse or reverse to drive while the car's moving.
Yeah, I think you just kind of mentioned how.
Well, I could do that in the Land Rover and grind up the gearbox.
Yeah.
In the EV, nothing happens.
Oh, okay.
Except if you put your foot on the accelerator.
That's interesting.
Then the polarity is reversed, and you like.
Could you spin your tires?
I don't know. I haven't tried. I don't want to damage the car.
One day. What about there's this myth that towing is, some people say you can, some people say you can't.
Apparently, it's not recommended. I mean, remember the iPace is 2.1, 2.2 tons. The battery's a big thing, and already there's a challenge with weight. So while I think EVs are ideal for towing because of the torque, exactly. It's apparently not recommended.
But you can. So if you really, really wanted to, it's not that you...
I wouldn't, I mean, if the OEM doesn't recommend it, don't do it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it.
Not yet, at least. I'm sure eventually we'll be able to get to that point.
So let's get Sean Nurse onto the screen, and let's review the 2021 Mazda BT50.
Awesome.
And Sean is with us in the studio. There we go. So welcome, Sean, our very own expert journalist, Sean Nurse, in studio virtually with us to review the 2021 Mazda BT50, which is a bucky. Sean, this is like... First of all, welcome back to the show, but this is an unusual car for you to have reviewed. I mean, we're used to seeing you in Porsches and Mustangs and the seriously fast sports exotic cars. So what's happening with this BT50?
Yeah, so it's good to be back on the show. I have to sort of open up my horizons here and test everything, I suppose. But yeah, I am quite a Bucky guy. I do like my Buckies anyway. And the BT50 is quite an anticipated product because it's a drastic change from its predecessor. It's no longer based on the Ford Ranger platform. It's now based on the upcoming Isuzu platform. We'll see the new D-Max coming to South Africa. So I was quite excited to get behind the wheel of the BT50.
So the BT50 has been, I think a lot of people, I think any sort of double cab that comes into the market, you have to talk about the Ranger, the Hilux, the Amarok. But now we have the P Series, which you had, previously. And I'm not sure if you've driven that car, but does this stack up to these old legends? If you would, kind of put it that way.
Yeah, this car, I was actually quite disappointed with the BT50, I'm sorry to say. It's based on, as I say, the Isuzu platform, but that platform itself is still quite old. They have updated it versus the previous Isuzu, but you're still getting essentially the same platform. And biggest issue I had with the car was its ride quality. I know Buckies with leaf spring rear suspensions are not known for their great ride quality, but this is definitely worse than other Buckies with leaf sprung rear suspension.
Why do you think that is?
I'm not sure. I don't think that it's been calibrated or tested properly for South African roads. I think that may be the reason why Isuzu have delayed the introduction of their D-Max. They're doing local testing to make sure it's possibly better suited for local roads. The ride gets better as you add load to the back, but it's still not great. It's just, there's a lot of bounce going on, when you're driving down, unless you have a perfectly smooth road, ride quality is not great.
Okay, that's very interesting. And okay, so besides ride quality, power, and power output, as well as interior quality, what was your sense there? And I mean, I know it's difficult for you, having been inside the likes of Porsches and exotic cars. So it's difficult to kind of compare. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was saying to Wandile earlier on in the show, I had to drive a petrol car yesterday, and it was like it was so different, and the car it felt so underpowered, but in the meantime it was just going back to a nice vehicle. So what is the interior like, and the actual power output?
Yes, I can imagine going from an EV to a petrol car is a bit of a change. The EV is so instantaneous. That's what's so great about them.
Exactly.
But powertrain-wise, that's actually where I was super impressed with the product. It's still got the old 3-liter inline 4-cylinder diesel engine. It's a bit gruff, but it's got a new turbocharger, produces 140 kilowatts and 350 newton meters of torque. It's paired to a 6-speed automatic gearbox. And I think that this car performs better than a Hilux and the bi-turbo Ranger. It just felt a hell of a lot more sprightly than the other Buckies. And I recently drove the Storm Track, and I can tell you this BT50 is quite potent. I wasn't really expecting it. They've definitely done a little bit more than a turbocharger from what I can tell. From an interior perspective, if you like the current Mazda design direction, I think you'll be impressed. It's pretty good quality. Fairly basic and utilitarian. It's still, even at nearly 800,000 Rand, featured cloth seats. It's got a reasonably good infotainment system with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Don't think it's the best specified product on the market, having looked at the competitors that are at a similar price. But if you're a Mazda fan, you'll definitely be at home inside. It definitely looks like other Mazda products inside. So I think they've done a good job from that perspective, and from an exterior perspective, I think it looks pretty good. But obviously, that's subjective.
Based on the two things that you've just said now, so you've said that the ride quality is not great, however, it's extremely powerful. Is this vehicle built more for someone who's going to be off-roading, for instance, versus someone who's going to be using it as a daily driver, taking the kids to school?
So I think conversely, the way that Mazda's marketed the product is as a lifestyle product that you would be using on a daily basis for things like the school run, but then also with the ability to go off-road. So for me, the Bucky's sitting in a kind of no man's land at the moment, because utilitarian ride quality of the BT50 doesn't really match the interior and exterior styling. And I think also the marketing spiel provided by Mazda, they're trying to bring the car across as being this lifestyle 4x4 Bucky that's quite premium. sort of in the same way Volkswagen have marketed the Amarok, but then you've got this ride quality and a powertrain that is more suited to someone who's going to be using the bakkie more for off-roading and potentially a more utilitarian purpose. So for me, the bakkie didn't really make sense in that regard, and it's quite expensive too, nearly 800,000 rand. So I think that Mazda have got some hard thinking to do, and they maybe need to redevelop suspension on the product for local markets.
That's very interesting. So so finally then, Sean, what would you give this bakkie out of 10?
Look, I don't think it's a particularly bad bakkie. I'd give it 6 out of 10 because I think they really need to look at what they want to offer the local consumer, because I think the product doesn't really know what it is at this point.
Well, that's very interesting. 6 out of 10. What have we got any other bakkies on the list that we can compare to?
Yeah, I mean, we had, as mentioned before, we had the P series that was actually a 7, which was priced a lot less. And I think, that's something that a lot of people praised because it was so cheap. You had the quality, but it was also very capable.
Cheap isn't a word I would use, though.
Cheaper. Definitely cheaper.
It's more cost effective. It's probably the politically correct thing to say. But yeah, okay. So P series was 7, and Sean's scoring this a 6. I'm assuming, Sean, is because of the bouncy back suspension.
Yeah, it's mostly the ride quality, and there's just
and the price point.
No cohesion. Yeah, no cohesion with what the product offers, I think.
Interesting stuff. Okay, so before we let you go, we were talking a little bit earlier, and we asked a couple of questions around, wear and tear on cars, and there was just one question that Wandile had, and that is bearing knock. He says, "What is bearing knock?" So I explained what I thought bearing knock was, which is kind of like, at low revs, you put your foot down, and you can get bearing knock. Am I describing it right?
Yeah, on the big end bearings, yeah. Like if you've got your car in an excessively low or high gear and you're loading the motor too much, you can get some bearing knock.
Which causes
a lot of
wear.
Products, lot of Subaru and BMW products suffer from big end bearing knock need a new crankshaft, and it's quite a big bill. So
don't do it. Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Exactly. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to learn more about all things car related and see more of Sean Nurse's reviews, go to autotrader.co.za and go to the news and review section, and you can go and do your research before you buy your next car. And very interesting. We've only got a couple of minutes to spend with Sean, but there are plenty of reviews there of by other expert journalists as well as Sean, and they give you their opinion. And remember, it's their opinion, so you've got to factor that in. And they're experts; they do this for a living. You've got to factor that into everything else you figure out. So go on to autotrader.co.za and go and have a look at the news and review section, and go and make up your own mind. Thanks very much, Sean, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Cheers.
All right, so that concludes the review of the BT50 Mazda 2021. Bakkies are South African things, I guess. 6 out of 10. 2 reasons. Well, I don't know.
I thought it would do better. Honestly, I thought it would do a little bit better.
Rear suspension, price point.
Well, yeah, that makes sense now. I didn't know it was that much. So
800,000 rand.
Yeah.
Anyway, so everyday people send AutoTrader motoring-related questions, all things car buying and selling, and Wendy and I will now attempt to answer 3 of your burning questions. What's the first question, Wendy?
First question is from Joram, who's asked, car losing water. So they bought a 2015 VW, and it's still under the service plan from VW. However, over the past few weeks, I've noticed that the car keeps losing water. They can't really identify what's going on, but they just know that obviously losing water is not great. And it doesn't seem like there's any leaks. Is there any way of definitively understanding where this leak or where this water loss is coming from?
Well, Joram, I think, first of all, it's a 2015, a second-hand Polo, obviously. Mechanically, these cars were very robust, from speaking to our expert journalists on your very question. Losses of coolant isn't typical of these cars. So you seem to have another problem, which probably is unique to that particular car. Start with the coolant cap.
Yeah.
Oftentimes the seal on the coolant cap goes, and then most of the time when coolant leaks out of a car, I mean, it's a sealed system. You see the coolant.
Exactly where it's coming from, yeah.
Yeah, so especially the next morning when the car's cooled down and it's dry, you'll see it leaves white marks where the leak is. So you could look for that. Alternatively, go and take the car to a franchise dealer and ask them to leak detect. Because they put the system under pressure while the car's standing, and they can detect where the leak is.
Makes sense.
Next question.
Next question is from Rob Deering, who's asked, "Hi there. Under lockdown, my car battery has died. Is there any way to restore it properly, not just in the short term?"
Well, short answer, Roberini, is that there is very little chance of you restoring that battery. You can't properly restore a rundown car battery, especially the lead acid type, because as it loses charge, a chemical reaction inside the battery leads to the formation of what's called lead sulfite crystals in the electrolyte mixture, which then deposit on the internal electrode plates of the battery. Now, it's all technical stuff, but the battery plates bend, and you can't unbend them. So this causes permanent damage to a lead acid battery. So unfortunately, you have to replace it. And most of the time, this happens after winter. I just replaced the battery in my aircraft after winter because winter causes the battery to heat up, cool down, and that causes damage as well. So besides letting the battery run down, but yeah, there's nothing much you can really do.
I think this question, because specifically speaking about lockdown, so you're saying it's not necessarily lockdown related problem. It could be
anything. It could be just coming out of winter.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily have to be lockdown.
Last question is from Rochelle, who's asked, "I'd like to know if a car that is financed by a bank requires a technical and roadworthy certificate." So essentially, Rochelle financed a vehicle 7 months ago and has only done 6,800 k's in it. But after the 150,000 kilometer service, they noticed that there were some issues with the car after diagnosis was done. And they want to know if, because it's been 7 months, if they can essentially get that money back that they lost.
Well, I mean, there's a bit of a disconnect here between the requiring a technical roadworthy certificate versus kind of claiming money back. So, when the car changes hands, you have to have a roadworthy certificate. Yeah. But on the question of the 7 months and 6,800 Ks over the car's warranty or service plan, unfortunately, that is too long gone to be able to claim anything. You've left it for too long, Rochelle. Yeah. And that's it.
That's all the questions I have.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of another AutoCentral show. And let's see what Hamilton does next time.
Yeah.